could we talk about some things maybe we want to prep for the summer, just some tips and some warning signs when our dogs might be in trouble?
Yeah, so I think heat stroke is probably one of the things I'm most passionate about. And the reason for it is that it's 100% on us as handlers, right? Like we're responsible for keeping these dogs alive when it comes to heat. And they, it's funny. I get asked a lot. I used to not, but in this era of social media, I get asked a lot about cold tolerance, right? I live in the northern part of the country, and you guys have had some cold snaps down there that aren't typical. And, I'd see people freaking out about, having their dog out in water when it's 32 degrees. And I mean, shoot, we're hunting dogs, when wind chills are below zero and it's well below 32 degrees up here. And I feel like on that end of the spectrum with cold, a dog's just going to shut. A dog will tell you that, hey, this isn't fun for me. And if you can read that, I don't feel like we get dogs into too cold of weather, and hypothermia in an observant handler just really isn't an issue, but I get asked about it a lot. The opposite is true with heat stroke and with heat issues, in that a dog will work itself right up to the state of killing itself. And if you can't recognize those signs, it can be too late by the time the dog's going to show you signs, and they won't stop. I mean, a dog will literally kill itself with heat. And they're not, it's not one of those things where like, boy, I'm hot, I need to take a rest, like they will in the cold. And so I think it's being aware with your dog, and it's variable. We talk about heat tolerance, and there are dogs that are very heat tolerant, and there are dogs that are not heat tolerant. And I've never owned a heat tolerant dog, and I hate it because it's on my mind this time of year. I didn't get my run in this morning, and so after we're recording, I'm planning on going for a run. And I sit here, it was in the 60s when I woke up, and I've had this internal debate all morning. Probably gonna be too hot to take the dogs, right? Probably too hot to take the dogs because I worry about heat stroke so much. Mm-hmm. What you're gonna notice in a dog is that they really start panting. So you get a dog that's real active and running, they pant heavily, but this is a different kind of pant because it's their way of cooling. So instead of just it's a roaring type of thing. Like you can hear it in the back of their throat, and they try to extend that tongue further out of their mouth. And I think it's just to make as big an opening as possible. And so you have that dog that you're used to seeing it, run and pant with that tongue out. And now suddenly that tongue seems like it's about a foot longer. They really have their mouth open, trying to increase that airflow. The other thing that will happen is that tongue will get flat and wide because they're trying to increase the surface area of the tongue as much as possible. And so, if you really keep an eye on your dog, you can see like they'll have that tongue nice and narrow when they're relaxed and, into what they're doing, but warm. That tongue will stay nice and narrow. Man, the minute they start getting hot, that tongue really broadens and flats out as they try to make surface area. The next thing that you're going to notice is ropey saliva, because they're not taking the time to swallow their spit. And so they start getting that ropey saliva. As we get further into the process, it starts drying out. So it gets that kind of that white cakey look. It'll hang from them where it just, they're not swallowing. So it's all just kind of dumping out of the mouth. And then the step before we really get into trouble is I think these dogs get a glassy look in their eyes, and it starts looking like nobody's home. Or they look at you and it's like, hey, boss, I'm in trouble. And it's a definite change in that dog's demeanor. And if we get to that point, if we didn't recognize those first couple of points with the panting and things like that, you need to shut it down immediately and start cooling that dog. You guys, I think, have it a little bit different because you're hot more of the year. And so I think, the dog conditioned to it more, you guys recognize it more. Where it's problematic in this part of the country, we lose dogs to heat stroke every summer and then every fall as we enter hunting season because people aren't able to recognize those issues that occur with these dogs.
What's the best way to cool them down?
So and that's been something that, again, I'm old enough that things have changed over time. There was a period where, people poo-pooed getting a dog wet or, ice, and now it's kind of come back in favor a little bit. I think the big thing, so I use ice in ice blocks. So typically like when I'm out hunting, I'll have a cooler along with stuff in it and have ice blocks, or I'll carry a cooler specifically in case I need to cool a dog down. The big thing is that you don't just want to put it on their trunk, right? So if you just put it on their back or on their chest, what sometimes happens and why ice was poo-pooed as a treatment is at that surface level, it can actually constrict the blood flow. And so it has the opposite effect. And so you kind of can give these dogs, essentially like what goosebumps are, right? So that you're pulling the blood away, which is going to heat the dog up. And so I don't aim for those areas. Where I do is way up in the armpits, trying to get into those big pipes of blood vessels deep in the groin and then over the jugular vein. So when I'm using ice, I'm targeting where there's areas of big blood flow, hoping to basically cool the blood flow down, not trying to cool the dog down as much. And then I think getting a dog wet is important if you couple it with airflow. And so I think if you just get a dog wet and just leave them, sometimes that can actually cause problems, and almost like it coats and insulates the dog, right? Versus if you make sure that water gets down to the skin, and then I usually get them in the truck with the air conditioning blowing on high over the top of them, or some type of fan. The big thing you don't want to do is throw them in a crate, because that can be just like throwing them in a sauna, right? They're in there panting, creating moisture, and they can get that hotter. And so I've seen, unfortunately, a number of people where they act like that crate is going to be a magic box, right? Like you put this dog in with heat stroke and I'm going to open it up and the dog's going to be fine. Right. And oftentimes the opposite occurs. They open up to a dead dog as opposed to a dog that's now fine. And so getting airflow, not putting that dog up until we know that temperature is down to where it needs to be and that the dog is back in a safe space. The thing I'd caution against is I've seen a lot of people advocate, just getting them into water, and water isn't always cool, so we get, shallow water, and that can be like swimming in a hot tub. And so we'll have dogs that you try to cool them down in standing water, and that might actually heat them up. And then the other thing that I've seen people, even if you send them into deeper, cool water, is you have this dog that's hot, mentally already having issues. And I've had dogs drowned from people trying to cool them down because they send them out to swim. And what's that dog doing when it's swimming? It's generating more heat, and it gets confused. And I've had dogs that, that people were trying to cool down with heat stroke that ended up drowning because they got confused and died. So standing water isn't always the answer. I think it's getting a dog wet with airflow, using ice, and making sure we're actually going in the right direction with the thermometer and cooling that dog down.
Gotcha. Okay. Hey guys, if you need raw dog food anywhere in the United States, be sure to visit our friends over at TexasTripe.com.